The first winter after the baby was born arrived quietly. Snow fell in slow, patient layers, covering the yard and softening every sound. Inside the house, warmth lived in small details: the ticking of the heater, the smell of clean blankets, and the steady presence of a large Bernese Mountain Dog named Bruno. Bruno had always been a calm dog, the kind that seemed built for patience. His size made people expect clumsiness, but in truth, he moved carefully, as if he was always aware of the space he occupied. Before the baby arrived, Bruno's world was simple long walks, quiet evenings, and resting near the fireplace. Henry was smaller than anything Bruno had ever seen. Bruno watched from a distance at first, not out of fear, but out of a deep, instinctual respect. Something about this tiny new human told him that closeness had to be earned, not taken. It was a new lesson for a dog who had always been welcomed with open arms. Days passed slowly, measured in cries and feedings. Henry cried, slept, and cried again. His parents moved through the house in tired rhythms, their steps heavy with love and exhaustion as they learned how to care for a life that depended on them completely. Through it all, Bruno stayed nearby. He didn't shadow the baby everywhere. Instead, he chose a spot near the nursery door and made it his place, lying there like a quiet, furry anchor in a sea of new emotions. What made this bond different was that it didn't start with a playful lick or a gentle nudge. It didn't start with touch at all. It started with waiting. Every morning Bruno listened. He became a student of sound. He learned the subtle shifts in Henry's breathing, the tiny hitch that came just before a cry, and the soft, deep silence that meant the baby was sleeping peacefully. Bruno adjusted himself to these sounds, his entire being tuned to the baby's rhythm, as if Henry's presence had rewritten his very instincts. One afternoon, Henry was placed in a bassinet near the window, a little cradle bathed in the soft gray light of a snowy day. Snow drifted outside, slow and endless, creating a peaceful, muted world. Bruno approached carefully, his paws silent on the wooden floor, and sat beside the bassinet, his large body perfectly still. Henry's eyes were open, unfocused, searching the new world around him. And then they found Bruno. The big dog lowered his head slightly, just enough for the baby to see his kind face. In that moment, Henry stopped moving. There was no smile, no sound. Just a long, curious stare from a tiny human to a giant, gentle dog. Bruno didn't move either. It felt less like a meeting and more like an agreement, a silent, unspoken pact that was as real and binding as any promise. From that day on, something shifted in Bruno. He began choosing places where Henry could see him. During feedings, he would lie nearby, a silent observer offering his steady presence. During naps, he rested close enough to hear every single breath, a self-appointed guardian. When the house grew loud with visitors or excited voices, Bruno would place himself between the noise and the baby. Not in a protective, dramatic way, but calmly, like a living wall that softened the world, absorbing the chaos so that only peace could reach the baby. As weeks turned into months, Henry began to respond. His eyes learned to follow Bruno's movements across the room. His small, uncoordinated hands would open and close when Bruno passed by, a tiny, silent greeting. And sometimes, when the baby fussed for no clear reason, when rocking and shushing failed, Bruno would stand and walk slowly through the room. His steady, rhythmic steps created a calming cadence that settled Henry almost immediately, a living metronome of peace. The parents started to notice something unusual. Henry slept better when Bruno was near. Not because the dog did anything special, but precisely because he didn't. His presence was constant, predictable, and unwavering. For a baby still learning what the world was, still trying to make sense of light and sound, that steadiness mattered more than anything. It was a source of comfort that asked for nothing in return. The first touch happened much later, long after their silent understanding had been forged. Henry was lying on a soft blanket on the floor, propped up by pillows. Bruno lay beside him, always leaving a respectful space between them. With a little wiggle, Henry rolled slightly, lost his balance, and instinctively reached out. His tiny fingers found Bruno's thick, soft fur. Bruno froze. Not in fear, but in profound care. He held his breath, waiting until the baby's grip loosened, and then he slowly, carefully, lowered his head closer. From that day forward, touch became a part of their language. But it was always rare, gentle, and never rushed. It was a privilege, not a given. As Henry grew, Bruno became his reference point in the world. When Henry learned to sit up, he'd glance toward Bruno, as if for balance. When he learned to crawl, his first wobbly journeys were always in Bruno's direction, toward that mountain of fur and patience. And when he laughed for the very first time, a pure, bubbling sound of joy, it happened while Bruno rested beside him, his big head on the floor, watching quietly. There was no single dramatic moment that defined their bond. It was built the way mountains are built, slowly, silently, over time, with a pressure so constant it becomes part of the landscape. Their connection was a collection of 1,000 tiny, quiet moments of shared space and silent understanding. By the time Henry could stand while holding onto furniture, Bruno adjusted again. He walked more slowly around the house. He lay closer to the ground, making himself smaller, more accessible. He made himself available without ever demanding attention, a constant, stable presence in the whirlwind of a child's development. One evening, as winter finally faded and the last of the snow melted away, revealing the first hints of spring, Henry took a few unsteady steps toward Bruno. He didn't fall, he didn't rush. He simply reached the big dog and rested his small forehead against his chest. Bruno lowered his head and stayed perfectly still, no excited tail wagging. No licks, just presence. That was their language. A language of stillness, of quiet, of being together. This was not a story about a heroic rescue or a dog saving a child from danger. It was a story about something quieter, but perhaps more profound. It was a story about stability. About a large dog teaching a small human what calm felt like, what patience looked like, and what unwavering loyalty truly meant. And years later, when Henry would walk confidently into the world, that deep sense of calm would stay with him, a quiet, steady strength deep inside, just like the Bernese Mountain Dog who had waited so patiently for him from the very beginning. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories about the incredible bonds we share with our animal companions.